Hello, my name is Oliver Dodd. I'm a lecturer in international relations and security studies at Liverpool John Moores University, and I'm very pleased to introduce my article, War of Movement, the Political Economy of Conflict Escalation in Colombia, 1990 to 1998, recently published in the Review of International Studies. My article seeks to answer a simple but important research question. Why did Colombia's armed conflict escalate so significantly in the 1990s to the point whereby the FARC, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, began to pose an existential threat to state authority by around 1998? The article departs by criticizing conventional approaches to the conflict, approaches which tend to flatten the conflict's development into narratives of state weakness and economic opportunities. Instead, I ground my argument in historical materialism and critical international political economy, situating the emergence of Colombia's weak state and the opportunities provided by drug trafficking within the broader dynamics of global capitalism. And he used Gramsci's concepts of passive revolution, crisis of authority, war of movement, also combining this with the broader framework of uneven combined development to explain how the escalation of the Colombian armed conflict was related to broader processes of global capitalist restructuring. My article draws upon semi-structured interviews with key protagonists, retired members of the Colombian Armed Forces, former FARC leaders, but also broader actors in civil society, such as business federation leaders and trade union leaders. And this allows me to not only understand the strategic evolution of the conflict, but also the international political and economic dimensions of it. I also combine interviews with extensive archival analysis in various archives in Colombia, but also the US National Security Archives. And I link the conflict's development to three key processes. One, the processes of the Colombian former states' reintegration into global capitalism along neoliberal lines in the 1990s. And two, the way in which these processes of restructuring ultimately reshaped the dynamics of the conflict and created new opportunities for the FARC's growth, a realignment of various subaltern identities with the FARC's rebellion. And three, I also highlight the FARC's development in relation to what I call internal state restructuring, the contradictions and conflicts between the imperatives of transnationally orientated restructuring and the implications that this had on domestic political and economic structures. And I argued that it's in response, the FARC's decision to pursue a war of movement in response to these three dynamics that really allowed it to transition from a more regional guerrilla group to a more nationwide insurgent army, characterized not simply by guerrilla hit and run tactics, but more overtly offensive maneuvers, engaging in mass recruitment, but also the purchasing of high-tech weaponry, which allowed it to change the balance of power on the battlefield. And it was in this context, the FARC's response to these three key dynamics that I highlight, that allowed it to really become the largest, most militarily formidable guerrilla organization, left-wing guerrilla organization in Latin America by about 1998. So to conclude then, I argued that we can't simply understand the development of the conflict through a focus on state weakness or economic opportunities. We needed to situate the changing dynamics within the international political economy. Indeed, I finished the article by rejecting the idea that the Colombian conflict was an internal conflict, that it has to be understood as fundamentally internationalized. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy reading the article.